Good morning. This webinar offers closed captioning. To enable closed captioning, click on the live transcript button on the bottom of your screen and choose your preferred method. Welcome to the City of Chicago Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection webinar. We have adapted our regular business education workshops at City Hall into these webinars until further notice. Please note any website or email that I mentioned will be posted in the chat box. For those seeking business licensing assistance, we strongly encourage the processing of licenses and permits online. Business licenses can be applied for or renewed online at chicagobusinessdirect.org, or you can call 312-74-GO-BIZ. If you are part of the BACP Entrepreneur Certificate Program, you can get credit for joining this webinar by sending an email to bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. If you want to learn about the program, please visit chicago.gov/business education. Also, this webinar is being recorded and will be available at youtube.com/Chicago BACP. I will post the mentioned information in the chat box. We encourage attendees to ask questions. Please use the chat box to send your questions. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Please note that the views, information, and opinions expressed during the webinar are solely those of the presenter and do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of the Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection or the City of Chicago. Today's webinar will be Fighting Fraud, presented by the City of Chicago Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. Mary Ann?
Hi, thank you, Geraldine. Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Ann Rigger. I am an associate staff attorney with Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. I've been in this role about 5.5 years as a prosecutor, prosecuting consumer fraud that entire time. I estimate that I have prosecuted over 2,000 consumer fraud cases. I'm familiar with the facts of what happened in all of those cases. I've talked to a ton of victims, and in that work, I have been able to pick out the patterns of the fact patterns of how deals go bad, how people are victimized, what it looks like, how it could have been prevented. So I put this webinar together to share some of that information with you. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, take my hand, we'll jump right in. All right, so starting with a kind of big picture of what the department does, we both issue business licenses and take them away. So we have an amazing team of business consultants that helps walk small businesses through the application process, tells people what licenses they need in order to conduct the business license activity that they want to do. But then the other side of that coin is where there's a bad actor, someone who repeatedly sells cigarettes to minors, or if there's a crime in a business and the business owner doesn't cooperate with the police, it's a pretty egregious activity. They will quickly find themselves in a license discipline process where they could face revocation. Also, we conduct outreach events like this one. If this is your first webinar, I am very honored, but I would encourage you to take a look at the Chicago BACP YouTube. There's tons of resources for consumers and for employees, small businesses, things like how to comply with ordinances, for businesses to file their taxes, marketing, social media. The outreach team is really amazing on that front. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that and at the BACP website. We also house the Office of Labor Standards. So if you're an employee and have concerns that your job may not be paying the right minimum wage or giving you paid sick leave, we also do Fair Work Week and anti-retaliation wage theft. So you can find information about that on our website. We investigate and prosecute businesses that may have violations of those labor standards as well. And then finally, kind of where I'm at within the department is we have a team of investigators that investigates violations of the municipal code, not just related to consumer fraud. We have teams that handle tobacco and liquor, teams that handle public vehicle, so taxis, Ubers, Lyfts, and then my team is the consumer fraud team. And we are a small but mighty team. And there are 4, I believe, investigators. They're veterans of the department. They're trained to, when they receive a complaint, to determine whether there are violations of the city's consumer fraud ordinance, as well as just technical violations of the municipal code. So let's get into more about my team and how we prosecute consumer fraud. So we prosecute consumer fraud through the Consumer Fraud Ordinance, which states that no person shall engage in any act of consumer fraud, unfair method of competition, or deceptive practice while conducting business in the city of Chicago. And what that ordinance doesn't do is actually define what is consumer fraud. And so we rely on a common law definition that you see on your screen here. Consumer fraud is a misrepresentation that a seller makes intending for a consumer to rely on it while engaged in trade or business. So to take that kind of out of the realm of legalese and put it in the real world, classic example of consumer fraud would be something like odometer tampering, where there's a shady used car business and they have a vehicle on the lot that has 150,000 miles. It's not moving. They decide, you know what, we're going to roll that odometer back from 150,000 miles to 50,000 miles and see if we can get someone to buy this thing. The odometer reading and rolling it back is a misrepresentation, right? The car doesn't really have 50,000 miles, it has 150. And that's a material thing. That's something that a consumer would rely on when deciding what vehicle to purchase. So odometer tampering, classic example of consumer fraud. Throughout this presentation, I will be using the term consumer, but the law is pretty well settled that a consumer can be either an individual person or it can be a business that's been harmed by another business. There are certain aspects of the law where an individual person does have kind of more protections than a business would, but by no means does the city's or a lot and oftentimes state law exclude a business from filing a complaint. So let's talk a little bit about what consumer fraud is not. So if you are just unsatisfied with work that you have done or unsatisfied with a business, that doesn't rise to the level of consumer fraud. If there is a misunderstanding between you and a business, it's not going to rise to the level of consumer fraud either. We see that a lot with when a contract is kind of vague. So if you're in talks with a business for your countertops and there's talk about and you end up walking away from the conversation thinking that you are getting quartz, and the business walks away from the conversation thinking that you are getting granite, and it's not really memorialized in the contract anywhere, then that misunderstanding isn't necessarily going to rise to the level of consumer fraud. And then finally, a breach of contract is not considered consumer fraud. So if the business's performance is 1 day late and the contract didn't specify that time was of the essence, then that 1 day, while it may be a breach, isn't going to rise to the level of consumer fraud. So let's talk a little bit about why it matters whether something is considered consumer fraud or is not considered consumer fraud. The reason why that matters is because it impacts the city's ability to obtain restitution. Restitution is a refund that is paid to the benefit of the complainant. So when I say restitution, you hear refund to consumer. the way that restitution works in the city of Chicago is that when we receive a complaint, our investigators take a look at it, determine whether there are either technical or consumer fraud violations. If there are consumer fraud violations, we issue a specific charge to seek a specific amount that a person is aggrieved, and that's the amount of restitution. Restitution is paid directly to the city of Chicago by the bad actor, and then the city of Chicago issues a check to the person that was aggrieved, the person that filed a complaint. But the city's laws that give us the authority to file these kinds of cases and to seek restitution make it clear that in order for us to be able to seek that kind of refund for a consumer, there has to be a violation of consumer fraud. But the last thing that I want to do is to discourage anyone from filing a complaint. So if you were harmed by a business and you're not sure, based on what you've just heard, whether it rises to the level of consumer fraud, you should file a complaint anyway. BACP will determine whether or not we do have that ability to seek a refund. And even where we can't, our investigators and our department as a whole want to make sure that we are keeping the playing field level for all businesses. So we don't want a bad actor to kind of profit off of the violations that they're committing of the municipal code. It's not fair. If they are profiting from just skirting the law constantly, and then the business down the street is playing by the rules and isn't making as much money by playing by the rules, we want to make sure that we are enforcing our ordinances against that bad business, again, to keep that playing field level. So always kind of stand on the side of filing the complaint versus not filing the complaint, because consumer fraud isn't just what my team does. We regulate a number of different kinds of businesses in a number of different kinds of ways. So on your screen, you'll see the types of businesses where we issue a regulated business license. So these industries are industries where City Council sought to protect consumers a little bit more, and more specifically regulates how these businesses can and cannot operate. These are not the only types of businesses that are required to have a license. Anything that's not on there would still be required to have a business license. It's just a different type of license. So again, these have more specific regulations that are meant to protect consumers, but it's not a comprehensive list of the types of businesses that need licenses. And in addition to that, another reason to kind of err on the side of filing a complaint versus not filing a complaint, sometimes where there are technical violations. So, things like putting your license number on a contract or an estimate or an invoice, that's a more technical requirement, but that can give rise to restitution because of the way that the ordinance works. And so the city's consumer fraud ordinance incorporates technical violations. So normally the city enforces city laws and the state enforces state laws, but the city's consumer fraud ordinance makes a violation of any of these Illinois laws a consumer fraud violation, even if the Illinois law, the Illinois requirement is kind of more technical. So I highlighted three that we kind of turn to most often: Home Repair and Remodeling Act, because it's written under the Consumer Fraud Ordinance. If there is a technical violation, it means that we may have the ability to ask for restitution on behalf of a consumer. Safe and Hygienic Bed Act, we have a lot of complaints against used furniture stores. There's certain disclosures that they are required to give to consumers about the condition, the materials that are, in the mattress, things like that. And so if they don't give you those disclosures, even though it wouldn't fit within that kind of traditional definition of consumer fraud that I talked about, even if, there's just a slight issue, a slight technical error, it could give rise to restitution because it's incorporated into the consumer fraud ordinance and then section of the Illinois Vehicle Code. Typically, we cite provisions related to towing and to used car sales. So again, technical violations of those sections of the Illinois Vehicle Code can end up being considered consumer fraud that allow us to seek restitution on behalf of complainants. So let's talk about kind of the limits of what our team can't do. So BACP does not represent individuals. When we file a case, it's the city of Chicago versus the bad business. So when you file a complaint, you don't have the ability to direct litigation like you would if you had filed a civil lawsuit. I represent the city of Chicago. So all of the actions that I take during the course of the case have to be to the benefit of my client. And many times, as I've stated, the complainant does benefit because we can seek restitution, but complainants are not a party to the case. Another limitation is that we don't have the ability to bring both sides in, sit them down, and mediate a dispute. We just don't have the ability to act that way between two private parties. The third thing, we can't accept any checks or anything else on behalf of the complainant. So sometimes a business wants to issue restitution directly to the complainant to kind of get the case over with. And that's not a bad thing for the consumer because it means that they get it right away. If restitution is part of the city judgment, then a business could get on a payment plan. It could take longer for the consumer to get their restitution. But if that's the arrangement, then the business has to reach directly out to the complainant to provide restitution directly. Or if what the dispute about isn't money, but an item, something like we had a case once, there was a dispute between a photographer and a customer, and the photographer was supposed to be taking photos of a special event and hadn't provided the disc with all of the photos. And the business wanted to leave the disc with the city and then have the complainant come in, but we can't take possession of that item. Again, that has to be done directly between the business and the complainant. And then finally, BACP investigators can't act as expert witnesses. So our investigators, you saw that list before of all the different industries that we investigate. They're not experts in every single one of them. They aren't mechanics, they aren't contractors. So this limits our ability to obtain restitution to cases where there is an amount that is kind of plainly visible. So if someone doesn't do any work at all, or the business doesn't perform at all, then that's pretty clear that the consumer would be entitled to the full amount that they paid. But if it's a construction project and the complaint doesn't itemize how much each item is going to cost the consumer, then we are not able to come in, take a look, and assign a value to what was done versus what wasn't done. I will say that if a consumer does have their own, if they contact another contractor, or if it's a motor vehicle repair complaint, if after the initial deal goes bad, they bring it to another body shop or have another contractor come in and give an opinion about what the value was and what wasn't done, then BACP can use that to ask for restitution. but BACP investigators are not qualified expert witnesses that can testify about the value of things that were done versus not done. So these are the most frequent complaints that we are going to discuss today. We'll go over what some of the red flags are, how to prevent yourself from being a victim of fraud in these areas. And then at the end, we'll talk about if it does happen to you, what you can do to try to recoup your funds that you paid. So the main way to prevent yourself from becoming a victim of consumer fraud is to do your homework. So where I always start is to talk to friends and family that I trust to see who they recommend. Look at Google, look at Yelp reviews to make sure that the reviews are there and to make sure that they're good reviews. There are so many businesses in the city of Chicago that I don't know that it's worth it to go with someone who doesn't really have a web presence to check up on, because one of the things that we see often is a bad business will shut down one entity and then restart as another entity, and it won't have a web presence. And so when you can't verify what the business has done in the past, you're really opening yourself up to a lot of risk of it being one of those businesses that are kind of fly by night, shut down, and then pop up under another name. So after you talk to friends and family, after you check online and you maybe have an idea of a couple businesses that you may be interested in, take a look at some of BACP's resources because they are pretty helpful. We on our website maintain a list of businesses that are licensed. We have lists of general contractors, and then we have our naughty list of businesses and individuals that were found liable for consumer fraud in the last 3 years. So a lot of times the complaints that we receive for consumer fraud involve businesses that just don't have any kind of city business license. And so checking it against these databases is going to make sure that they at least have a business license. And then the last thing is to check on the corporation status. So if a business is holding itself out as a corporation, it has Corp or Inc. after their name, you can check the website listed there, and it will tell you whether the corporation is active or whether it's dissolved, whether it even existed. And filing the paperwork to make sure that you are a corporation that's active and in good standing, it's not a very high burden. It's a relatively straightforward thing to do. So if you search a business name in there and you see that it's dissolved or not in good standing, it's a pretty big red flag, not just because they're failing to take this very basic step, but also because if a business is dissolved or in bad standing, or if the entity doesn't exist, then even if you file a complaint, and even if the city gets a judgment that includes restitution, if the entity is dissolved or never existed, then they may not have any assets for us to be able to actually collect that restitution that you're owed. So take a look. If they're holding themselves out as a corporation or as an LLC, take a look at that to make sure that they are active and in good standing. So you are going to want to make sure that you get absolutely everything in writing. It makes everything clear at the outset. A lot of complaints that we receive, the dispute is often because there was just a misunderstanding, or the contract didn't clearly lay out what the business was going to do for the consumer. But another reason why you would want to make sure that you have a contract that depicts what the transaction actually is going to be is because it'll protect you in the event that you are harmed by the business. So we would ask for that if you are going to be filing a complaint. But at the outset, it makes it very clear how much you're going to be paying and what you're getting. And then if there are any changes that come up after the contract is signed, you're going to want to make sure that there's a change work order or an additional contract that memorializes what the change is. So if you sign a contract, to have your kitchen redone and it seems like they're doing a really good job and you want to, add something in, you know, change the flooring in your bathroom or something like that, um, don't don't allow that to proceed verbally. Make sure that you have an additional work order or contract that reflects what additional work they're going to take on and how much. So you also want to get a second opinion that can be very helpful as lay people, especially in the motor vehicle repair realm and in the general contracting realm. We just don't have the knowledge or expertise to know whether a business is giving us an accurate, um, you know, determination of what the issues are and what it's going to cost. So for me personally, if someone is trying to sell me, premium air for my tires, that's going to ring an alarm bell. But for anything else, I'm not a mechanic, so I would probably get a sec. If someone's quoting me a lot of money for a major repair, I would go to a second body shop for my car and see whether the diagnosis matches and see whether the prices are comparable. And if they're not, and one is way cheaper, maybe even get a third opinion and see, which ones are seeming more reasonable. But again, kind of keep in mind that if you are getting a quote that is way lower than the other businesses, that's a red flag. You're going to want to maybe question the business on how they're able to do something for so much cheaper, because that's another major way that bad businesses lure people in, is to kind of show these really attractive deals to induce people to sign with them and then to manipulate and take advantage of them. So another tip to avoid a bad business is to avoid paying cash. Cash transactions can't be traced. It's good to use a credit card if possible, because you can file a chargeback if something does go wrong with your deal. Then in addition, if you end up filing a consumer fraud complaint with the department and all you have to show is proof of payment, is like a large cash withdrawal, it's difficult for the city to show that that large cash withdrawal was actually paid to the contractor. So if you're going to pay cash, if you have to pay cash, make sure that you're getting a receipt that shows that the payment was made that way. And then finally, like I said, keep all paperwork. If you end up needing to file a complaint, having evidence of what the agreement was and proof of payment, receipts, all of that helps to establish that you kept your end of the bargain, you made your payment, and you did everything you were supposed to do, and this business has just completely taken advantage of you. So going into what is definitely the number one most common type of complaint in the city of Chicago, and honestly, probably across the country. We, as a prosecutor, part of my job is to meet with other regulators from the region and to kind of talk about the types of complaints that we're seeing, how people are paying, things like that. And home repair fraud is pretty much across the board the number one complaint type that different consumer fraud departments across the country are seeing. So let's talk about what the red flags are, what should immediately raise alarm bells when you're taking on a home repair project and you're talking to different companies, what should raise those alarm bells. So the first one is unsolicited contact. And honestly, this isn't even just for home repair fraud. You should immediately be suspicious of anyone making unsolicited contact with you, because I can't tell you how many of our complaints start with that mere fact that fact that someone approached them to engage in business with them. So this can come in different forms. So we see after a fire or storm, businesses know that homeowners are going to have access to large sums of money from their insurance companies. And so we've had complainants that have said that there was a devastating fire loss in their home and that they got a call that the contractor was on scene before the fire department was, because they listen to scanners so that they know where these things are happening. And they come in and, you're not thinking about, is this person scamming me? You're thinking about, my house just burned down. What am I going to do now? And they're there, and often they are very good at making you feel more comfortable, assuring you that everything's going to be okay. So just make sure that if something catastrophic happens, just try to be on alert that there are people that may want to manipulate you and take advantage of you in this vulnerable state. Similarly, after big storms, lots of roof damage can happen. And you, again, vulnerable state, you are not really considering whether someone is trying to manipulate you. And you may not feel like you have a ton of time to get multiple quotes because there's something massively wrong and you're just trying to try to get the problem taken care of quickly. But be on alert for those two specific kinds, fires or after a storm. But it can also be someone knocking on your door, maybe in the middle of the afternoon, saying, "Oh, we were doing business in your neighborhood. We were installing, putting in concrete for one of your neighbors down the street, and we have these leftover materials that we won't be able to use past today. So we'll give you a really good deal. We noticed that your porch could use some TLC. So if you do business with us, then we'll be able to give you a good discount because these materials were going to go to waste anyway." And when that happens, maybe they'll start to do some work. They'll usually ask for a cash payment, and they either never return after doing maybe an hour or two of work, or whatever they do isn't very quality anyway. So always be on the lookout for anyone that's making unsolicited contact, and tread very carefully. The next red flag is if they can't provide their business license or liability insurance, or if what they provide to you has a different name than they've given you. So if someone, excuse me, so if someone is saying that they are from, ABC Corporation, and the insurance they give you doesn't match that, that's going to be a red flag. One thing that we commonly see is people pulling permits under excuse me, 1 minute here. Okay, so one thing that we see is a business pulling a permit for another business, because pulling a permit requires a general contractor license. Fraudulent businesses don't always have it, or if they have their own licenses revoked because they're bad actors, they can ask someone else to try to pull a permit that's required. Major red flag, both businesses are in violation. So if what's on the contract and what is on the license and the insurance isn't matching up, huge red flag. Depending on the kind of work, demanding a full payment in advance can be a huge red flag. Next, cash only payments. A business should be able to accept other kinds of payments. So again, be very, very cautious about businesses that are only demanding cash. Another one is business asking you to quick pay someone else. So again, you sign a contract with some business and they're asking you to make a checkout to an individual or quick pay some individual, that's a red flag. Good businesses don't operate that way. The next one has generic contracts or estimates. Big box construction stores and office stores, I think, have these pre-made pads of paper. And the city's home repair ordinance requires a lot of information to be provided to consumers. So there has to be a business name, there has to be a business address, the license has to be on the estimate or the contract. The contract has to clearly lay out what the project is, what materials are being used. And when you are dealing with a business that is using that kind of really generic contract where it's literally just a big plain box, they're not providing you the information that they're required to under the ordinance. So be on the lookout for those as well. Again, price quotes that are far below the estimates of other companies should kind of ring the alarm bell. And then finally, with home repair fraud, there are certain consumer rights documents that a business is required to give to you. So the first one is the consumer rights brochure. And the business is required to give this to you. There's a part on the back of it where the homeowner signs, the contractor signs, and it's dated, and the business is required to cut out that signature portion and then keep that on file, and you hold on to the consumer rights brochure. And then the other document that you're required to be given during a home repair project, if the project is signed at your home, is the 3-day right of rescission. So it's actually not even just for home repair. Any contract that is signed in your home gives rise to this 3-day right of rescission, where you have the right to cancel the contract. You have the right to change your mind. People in their homes are more vulnerable. So the law gives those people that sign the contract in their home this out. And then the businesses where they are signing contracts in people's homes are required to notify consumers that they have that right. So what happens then when we see someone hire a bad home repair business? They take off with your money, never finish the work. Anything that they do complete has serious quality of work issues, potential building code violations, and then a major one, no permits are pulled and no inspections are done. And that gives rise to huge liability for homeowners for a couple different reasons. So first, the city's building department is tasked with making sure that work that's done is safe, so that no one is harmed by shoddy work. And a lot of times inspections are required to be done to make sure that what a business did was safe. So if you have plumbing or electrical done, and the work was one where an inspection would be required, if that work is drywalled over and that gets found out, they're going to make you pull out that drywall so that they can inspect and make sure that the plumbing and the electrical isn't going to cause a flood in your house, or make your house start on fire. And then you would be responsible, the homeowner. You're going to have someone else come in to re-drywall, or if the work was done poorly, to tear out all that poorly done work, have the work redone, and then re-drywalled over. When cases are filed, it's against the homeowner. And of course, you could file a consumer fraud case, and BACP would take a look at that. But you're going to, at the end of the day, consumers are the ones that end up having to pay the price to make sure that the work is done, and then to cover up if you have to re-drywall, that's at the cost of the homeowner. So potentially there is huge losses that come with hiring a bad home repair company. So I talked with our investigators who have maybe just a slightly different perspective. So when I get these cases, they're cases where the investigators did find violations. We're going to be proceeding. We're filing a complaint. But our investigators don't issue enforcement on every single case. Sometimes they have to close out complaints where we don't have authority or the ability to proceed. And so I asked them, what investigators, what perspective do you have to share? What should we tell consumers from your point of view? And so this is what they came up with, that big box construction stores sometimes have lists, or there are websites that are dedicated to having lists of home repair contractors. And they are presented as businesses that are good, solid, licensed, et cetera. But we end up still receiving a lot of complaints against those businesses, or sometimes against the stores themselves, because consumers are under this belief that the construction store or the website is endorsing those contractors. And so when things go wrong, the store or the website ends up disclaiming liability in the fine print. They're not responsible for what those contractors are doing. And so all of this is really just to say there's no substitute for vetting these companies yourself. Go through the process that we talked about, recommendations from friends and family, checking BACP's websites, checking online reviews, make sure that you're kind of spreading it out and doing as much research as you can on these businesses to make sure that you are not taken advantage of. So moving into what is probably the second most common complaint that we receive is motor vehicle repair shops. And I think, again, the reason goes back to, as lay people, we're not mechanics, we're not contractors. It's hard for us to know whether a business is telling the truth about the work that we need to have done and whether we're being charged a fair price for that. And so, again, to protect yourself against fraud in this area, receiving more than one, going to more than one shop and just shopping around will help you to see whether what you're being quoted is reasonable. Now, again, as I said, our investigators are not experts, they're not mechanics, and so they're not able to, they're not able to look at your car and make a determination on whether what the repair shop did was good or bad work. And it's similar to when we were talking about home repair fraud. Our investigators don't conduct on-site inspections. They're not contractors, architects, engineers, plumbers. They're not qualified in that way to make a determination on whether or not the business did good or bad work. So when we receive a motor vehicle repair shop complaint, the investigators are making sure that the businesses are licensed and that you are receiving all of the information upfront that you are entitled to receive. And so the estimate or the price quotes that you're receiving, you're required to be given this information. So name, contact info, information about your car, including in and out mileage on your car. You have the right to decide whether or not you want to inspect any parts that the shop replaced. So if you're just feeling a little skeptical, you have the right to elect on the actual price quote. Yes, I want to see what you took out of my car and replaced, or no. If it's a body shop that you trust, you can say, no, I trust you. I know that you're not going to say that you did work that you didn't do. So then you also have the right to know whether the work is warranted or not. A motor vehicle repair shop is not required to provide you a warranty on parts or labor, but they are required to tell you upfront whether they are warranting the work or not. And then lastly, you have the right to choose what happens if the work is going to exceed the estimate. So if they conduct an estimate and they discover additional problems, you have the right to decide in advance what you want the shop to do in that case. So your options are then to either have the shop prepare another estimate. You have the right to say, I don't want to approve any amount. I want you to prepare another estimate for whatever you found and let me know how much that's going to be. And then you also have the choice, if you want it, to decide if there's a certain amount that you're comfortable with the shop going up to if it's going to exceed what you were originally quoted. So if you were originally quoted 500 and you decide, I trust this business, if they say that there's another 250 that I need, then you can say, you can go up to 250. And if it's going to exceed 250, then call me for approval. And then you also have the right, if it's someone, that you trust and you've been going to for years, you also have the right to make the choice to allow the shop to do whatever work they feel is necessary to make the car run properly. So, if it originally costs 500 and they find you need, new, I don't know, transmission or something, and it's going to be thousands more, you have the right to say, body shop, I trust you, and you can charge me whatever it costs. One thing to note is that motor vehicle repair shops are allowed to charge for an estimate. So that is not a red flag. When they spend time diagnosing your vehicle, it's understandable that they wouldn't want to do that work for free. And so they are allowed to charge an amount for an estimate. And that amount for the estimate isn't really limited by law. So you can ask before you take or before they, you hand over your car, ask how much it costs for them to prepare an estimate. And I have found that in most cases, if you decide to go with a certain shop, they'll apply whatever you paid for the estimate towards whatever work needs to be done anyway. So next we'll go into rogue towing, just to kind of describe what this is. Rogue towing is when you are involved in an accident and a tow truck just shows up. We have found that in those scenarios, they are listening to police scanners to determine where accidents are happening, and then they race to that location. Sometimes you might see these tow trucks kind of on ramps waiting, listening to the scanner, waiting to jump on the expressway to race to where a collision was. And then once they get there, they have you sign a tow disclosure. And in order to get you to sign that tow disclosure to do business with them, they may represent themselves as having been sent by your insurance or having been sent by the city or the state or IDOT or AAA. And they're not actually affiliated with any of those entities. They're just saying that to induce you to sign this disclosure. And what happens on these disclosures is a lot of times they will have the business name and the business address, and some of the lines for the costs will be filled in. So, cleanup fees, the tow fee, some of those areas will be filled in, but there's a place on those towing disclosures for the business to provide a total. And we see that these road towers don't provide a total because the fees end up being so egregiously expensive. We've seen them up to $8,000. And these businesses are relying on, consumers being kind of shaken up after an accident, not really thinking much about, being taken advantage of by this tow truck. So what we would recommend then is, going back to don't accept unsolicited businesses that you didn't solicit. So call for your own tow. If they're saying that they were sent by your insurance and you haven't even contacted your insurance company, how could they possibly have been sent by them? Or you can just call your insurance company and verify whether or not they called or sent anyone out. It's always within your right to just take a moment and call for your own tow or call and verify with whoever they may be representing an affiliation with to verify with them whether they actually called. And then finally, never sign a tow authorization that has those blank spaces. If they're not totaling it out, look at the math and see what they're actually charging you. Depending on how far you're going, tow shouldn't be maybe more than a few $100s. So we shouldn't see towing businesses trying to charge $3,000, $4,000, $8,000. It's just so completely egregious, but the amount that a tow truck can charge isn't limited by law. So, a business could charge that amount, but it isn't reasonable. You should just take a second look and preferably call for your own tow truck. Now, the city has passed ordinances recently trying to kind of clamp down on this. And so what you see on your screen is a City of Chicago emblem that would be in the window. So if someone comes to tow your vehicle, they don't have this sticker. Going forward, it is a requirement. So if you don't see this in the window, that's going to be a red flag that that business is not actually authorized to operate that tow truck in the City of Chicago. Right, next, purchasing a used vehicle. So Illinois has this requirement that a used car business provide an implied warranty. So you should see a document when you're shopping for used cars. This would be posted in the window, and it notifies you that powertrain components are warranted for 15 days or 500 miles, whichever happens first. There is an out-of-pocket cost if there is a problem with one of those powertrain components, but the cost is limited to only up to $100. It is a bit limited in that it doesn't apply to cars with more than 150,000 miles, rebuilt titles, salvage cars that weigh more than 8,000 pounds, or antiques. But the main thing that you want to look for is to make sure that you at least see the implied warranty in the vehicles of cars that you're shopping for. One thing that I did want to clear up is that there is no right of rescission on vehicle sales. Our department does receive complaints where someone didn't really do their due diligence when they were buying the car, and these issues pop up that could have been prevented if you had a mechanic inspect the car. So if you purchase a used car and the brakes are really bad, or something like that, you cannot bring the car back to the shop and demand your money back. A body shop is not required to, or I'm sorry, a used car shop is not required to accept that vehicle back and then to give you your money back. And then the final thing that I wanted to talk about with when you're buying a used car is third-party warranties. I feel like these have kind of become somewhat of an internet meme that we want to reach you about your car's extended warranty. So I think that people are starting to see these for what they are. You just want to be careful and know what exactly they're going to cover and what they won't. We once received a complaint against it was against a third-party warranty company. This consumer had this idea to buy a super cheap used car that was just an absolute piece of junk. And then she also purchased a third-party warranty, thinking, well, I'll just file a claim with the warranty after I buy this car, and then they'll fix everything. And then I've got this amazingly, cheap car that now functions perfectly. This is misunderstanding. This is not consumer fraud. The consumer kind of misunderstood what it was. So I just want everyone out there to be aware of, the fact that warranty companies often aren't going to cover any damage that exists at the time of purchase, and to know what exactly is covered. So maintenance things like brakes often are excluded, but it's something that is agreement by agreement. If you're spending your money on it, just make sure that you read through and know exactly what you're getting for what you're paying. Another one that I wanted to talk about, private booting. Again, kind of just a PSA here because we don't see a ton of fraud, but I feel like a lot of people in the city of Chicago file complaints, not realizing that this kind of activity is allowed in the city. So private booting is when a property owner, someone who owns a parking lot, contracts with a business to make sure that only authorized vehicles are parking in that lot. So we get a lot of complaints where someone leaves the lot. So a lot of times this is in like strip malls or something like that. You park your car in the lot for Dunkin' Donuts, you go to Dunkin' Donuts, but then you leave and go across the street. As soon as you step foot off that lot, uh, even if you patronized a business in that lot, that's still going to be a proper boot. You're only allowed to park in those lots while you are patronizing the businesses with those lots. So the booting companies are required to post a sign that says who is authorized to park in that lot. And if the signs aren't there, then the booting company is in violation and you could submit a complaint and possibly receive restitution. But I did want to just make everyone aware that you can't leave before or after patronizing a business. It's going to be a proper boot. However, if you do, if you leave and you come back and the boot isn't fully affixed to the car, they have to take it off for no charge. But I will say, I've seen these videos. They get a boot on in like a minute or less. They're really fast. And then also, they can't boot if someone is actually in the car. Major safety issue, huge violation. File a complaint if that happens. But be aware that as a consumer in the city, you are kind of bound by rules as well when it comes to where you can and cannot park. Again, IRS fraud. So the city of Chicago, BACP enforces its ordinances against businesses that conduct business in the city of Chicago or are based in the city of Chicago. And so when we have these email scams or phone scams and they're difficult to trace and we can't find that they are connected to the city, we may have to refer them out. But since it's that time of year, I did want to talk for a moment about IRS fraud. And so what this looks like is you'll get an email, phone call, even an in-person visit from someone claiming to be from the IRS, saying that you owe taxes. They can be really threatening, saying that you're going to go to jail, that you owe money immediately, or it could be on kind of the other end of that and say, we have money that we want to give you. Please make sure you call me back. This is kind of red flags. If they demand immediate payment, the IRS will give you an opportunity to appeal any amount that they say that you owe. They're going to contact you by mail. So if you're getting these kind of threatening phone calls or emails, contact the IRS directly. Their phone number is listed there. And then if you get a call saying that it is the IRS, I would hang up and just call back. Technology today allows scammers to spoof certain phone numbers. So when you get a call in, it could appear that it is actually coming from the IRS. Just hang up, recall directly so that you can make sure you know who you're talking to. And then finally, sales of commercial goods. Throughout this entire presentation, I think I've been saying consumer a lot, and I just want everyone out there to remember that we're not just talking about individual people. Businesses can be consumers as well. And so we've had a couple complaints come in regarding websites that appear to be based in the city of Chicago, offering commercial sales to other businesses. The kind of hallmarks of it is that they list a PO box. There's not a lot of contact information, but they're offering massive discounts on commercial items. So a $10,000 oven being offered for $2,000. And we've gotten a couple complaints like that where a business files a complaint because they trusted this website. They made a large purchase and they never received anything at all. So when you are looking online, shopping online, just make sure that there is, an actual business address. You can pull up Google Maps, type in that address, see where it comes out to, see if the address exists, so that you can verify that you are doing business with an actual business and not just a scammer. So those are the common types of scams that we see. Let's talk about why we fall for them. So first, they present exciting offers, and the offers may seem too good to be true. So you don't want to pass it up. You hope that it's true. You want it to be true. And so you're more inclined to kind of fall for it because it's something that you really want at an amazing price. Or we talked a little bit about an offer being kind of time sensitive. So where there is a fire loss or something related to storm damage, you may not feel like you have a lot of time to shop around. And so scammers kind of acknowledge that we're inclined to want to do business with someone offering a too good to be true price, or they realize that um, when time is of the essence, people feel really pressured to make a decision right then. And so they rely on that to manipulate you. Another reason why is they prey on our politeness. I don't know about you guys, but it feels super rude to me to, slam the door in someone's face. We don't want to do that. But the longer we allow someone that is a scammer to talk to us and to convince us, that just increases the likelihood that you're going to fall for their scam, because a lot of times these scammers are not like hardened, grizzled people. They come across as being really friendly. They build a rapport with you. They make you trust them, and then they manipulate that so that you'll give them money or give them access to your information or whatever it is that they're looking for. They are trying to just build trust with you. Um, they present themselves as an authority. So again, this kind of goes back to us being lay people. We're not mechanics, we're not contractors, and they'll say, I've been in this business 30 years. If you don't sign a contract with me, if we don't deal with this right now, your roof is going to collapse in, and you're going to be in a much worse position. And they'll tell you that you need to act imminently, and um, it's hard to ignore that when you acknowledge the fact that you can't be an expert in everything, and that this person who seems really experienced is presenting to you that you need to act imminently. It's hard to ignore that and to kind of have the frame of mind that you should go get a second opinion. And finally, I do want to make everyone out there aware that the complaints that we receive don't come from just one, age group or educational background or anything like that. We receive complaints from people all throughout the city. Uh, we have some statistics here from the Federal Trade Commission, and what we found is that people that are relatively younger, 30 to 39, filed the most complaints, but then those in the 60 to 69 age group had the biggest losses. Um, some, I was kind of surprised by the next information, not necessarily the most common form of payment being credit cards, but the payment types that had the largest losses across the country from the FTC was cryptocurrency. So I think that's something else to be aware of if someone is asking you to pay with Bitcoin or something like that. Completely untraceable. So just be very cautious about that. We get a lot of people that seem really embarrassed or disappointed in themselves. I want you to know that when you come forward, there's absolutely no judgment. We want to help you with your complaint, and you shouldn't let that kind of, whatever embarrassment stop you from stepping forward. So if you end up being a victim of consumer fraud, we want you to make sure that you get all your documentation together, your contract, estimates, invoices, proof of payment, any photos that you have, and then any correspondence between you and the business could potentially be helpful. And then you can file a complaint in a couple of different ways with the department. Call 311, download the 311 app, or go online, 311.chicago.gov. Then in addition to that, we do recommend that you consult with a private attorney. We've talked about when the city can and cannot seek restitution on your behalf. And there are time limits for filing a lawsuit so that you can recoup your money. And so if it's going to be a case, there's going to be a lot of times where the city can't seek restitution on your behalf, but we don't want that to stop you from talking to an attorney. You can file a private lawsuit at the same time that the city has its consumer fraud case pending, and the two cases don't impact each other. Of course, if you are seeking a refund, you file a private lawsuit, the city, and you actually recoup money, the city isn't going to ask for restitution. We can't, double dip in that way. But the two cases can absolutely proceed at the same time. The city is filing its case based on the business not, being in violation with the city's laws about how a business operates. And your theory of relief would be slightly different. A civil lawsuit would be based not on the city's ordinances. So we've gotten some feedback because the 311, this is the splash page for 311. And you can file all different kinds of complaints on the 311 website. So I've been asked just to kind of walk people through how you would file a consumer fraud complaint. Excuse me. So if there are other types of, we talked about labor standards, taxi cabs, liquor license, tobacco businesses. If you have complaints about that or any other city requests, they all go through 311 and they're all routed to the appropriate department. So any complaint that you have that you would want to file with the city of Chicago, even if it's not related to business affairs or consumer protection, this is where you would do it, 311.chicago.gov, or call 311 or download the app. But how you would file a consumer fraud complaint. So again, this is the splash page. When you go to 311.chicago.gov, you would click create a service request. You'll have the ability to create an account or you're not required to create an account. If you do end up creating an account, then your service request will be saved there so that you can easily check on the status as it kind of makes its way through the process. So after you click that first button, it'll come to service request. You'll click that. You'll click consumer and employee protection, and this is making sure that it kind of gets routed to BACP. If you're out there writing frantically, trying to write down exactly what buttons to click, remember Geraldine said that this will be posted to BACP, the YouTube channel, so don't worry too much about writing down exactly what buttons you want to click. So you'll click consumer and employee protection, and then you'll click on consumers, and then consumer fraud complaint. Even if your complaint, I know you may see there consumer retail store complaint, even if it is you're wanting to file a complaint against a store, click consumer fraud complaint. That'll make sure that it's getting to our team quickest. And then it'll ask you for some basic information, the nature of your complaint, when it occurred, how much you paid, how you paid. You do have the ability to file a complaint anonymously. I would recommend that you not. When you file a complaint anonymously, we can't seek restitution because restitution is paid through the city of Chicago, like I mentioned before. The restitution is part of the city's judgment, meaning the business pays the city directly and then the city disperses the check to you. And in order for us to know who to provide that refund to, if we're able to seek it, we need to have your contact information. I think the number one reason why someone would want to file an anonymous complaint is some kind of fear of retaliation. And I can tell you that in my years here, we haven't seen that. And you should keep in mind that when you file a complaint, you're not a party to the case. It's the city of Chicago enforcing city laws against a business. So we're not out there throwing consumers under the bus by any means, and we don't present it to the business that way. It's the business's failure to comply with our ordinances that ends up with them being in our courtrooms. So don't be too afraid to come forward, file your complaint. It helps also because investigators may have follow-up questions. Maybe there's more paperwork that you didn't submit that we need. And if you file anonymously, we don't have the ability to kind of do that follow-up with you to get the information that we need to make our complaint as strong as possible. So this is where you would fill in your contact information. When you click next, it brings you to a summary where you can review all the information that you submitted, and then make any edits or changes if you filled out something incorrectly. And then you would submit. You'll get a service request number, SR21 dash, and it's going to be a series of numbers. If you create an account, you can hit follow request. And so that'll update as it makes its way, through the triage team, to being assigned to an investigator, to being assigned to the attorney and going, being filed in court. So if you hit follow request, it'll automatically track it in your account, but you could just write down, the service request number SR21 dash whatever, and then go back to that SHI 311 website and put it in, and it'll tell you the status of your complaint that way as well if you don't want to make an account. So after you fill out your complaint, 311 will direct BACP complaints to BACP. We have a triage team that does a preliminary check to make sure that we have authority and jurisdiction. So we make sure that the business is in the city of Chicago, or if they're not based in the city of Chicago, but they do work in the city of Chicago, then that allows us to proceed with the case as well. But if they're outside of the city and the work wasn't done in the city, then they're going to be beyond our scope. Then additionally, there are certain types of businesses that we can't issue complaints against because we are prevented by state law. So the state has laws that say that they exclusively can regulate, doctors or nurses. And so in that event, we would have to refer your complaint to another agency that has the authority to prosecute a complaint against that type of business. We'll always tell you that we need to make that referral. We'll always tell you if a complaint is closed and why it's being closed, and who may be able to provide assistance if the city can't help you with your complaint. So when we verify that we do have authority and jurisdiction to proceed, then we will contact both you and the business to make sure that we have all of the paperwork to understand what your side is, what the business's side is, and then they will look at all of that and determine whether there's violations with the municipal code. They'll look at whether there are consumer fraud violations, and then they'll also look at whether there were technical violations. So, did they have their business address on there? Was it the correct phone number, the correct business name? Were they licensed? Was their corporation active? Did they give you the consumer protection documents that they're required to give? Things like that. So based on whether or not there are violations of those sections, they'll issue administrative notices of violation. And those are tickets that we send to the business. We notify the business that they're in violation of the municipal code. We can seek fines that would be payable to the city, and then we can seek restitution payable to the consumer. I've mentioned restitution a number of times now, and I did want to add that restitution, when it's part of the city judgment, is enforceable, just like the city's judgment is for fines. So any action that the city could take to recoup or to make someone pay for their fines that they owe to the city is then available for us to make sure that they pay the restitution that a consumer is entitled to. So wage garnishment or liens on property, things like that. We don't ever give up on our restitution amount. We don't reduce it. We will always make sure that if a case is settled or arrangements are being paid for restitution, that the full amount that we sought and that the consumer was entitled to is paid by the bad business. When cases are filed, they're at the Department of Administrative Hearings at 400 West Superior. That's the courthouse where we prosecute these. Our cases are heard by administrative law judges that decide whether or not the violations occurred. After a case is filed, those are the three different ways that a case could come to its conclusion. Would be through a default judgment. That's when a bad business doesn't show up. So then we enter a judgment for the maximum fines that could be entered against a business, and restitution. We offer to settle the case for less than the maximum. There's minimum and maximum fines that are associated with every single violation of the municipal code, between 500 and 10,000 or 100 and 1,000. Each different section has a different fine range. So in an effort to settle a case, we would not ask for maximum fines. We would settle for something under that amount. Or if they don't want to settle the case, then we have a contested hearing, basically a trial, present our evidence and testimony to an ALJ. They present their testimony and evidence, and that administrative law judge will decide whether or not the business is liable for violations of the municipal code and whether or not the consumer is entitled to restitution. After a judgment is entered, we send it to the Department of Finance, who is tasked with collecting the money from the judgment. So here's our results from last year. We had 402 cases that were concluded. There were 4.3 million in fines entered against bad businesses and 80,000 in restitution to complainants. So that concludes my presentation. I am happy to answer any questions that anyone has, and I apologize for my voice going out. I must not be used to talking for this long. So thank you everyone for bearing with me, and let's take a look at some of those questions. I saw some of them come up during the webinar.
Great. Thanks so much, Miriam. So first question, what does dissolve on the SOS actually mean for the business?
So when it says that a business has been dissolved, it means that they are no longer a corporate entity. Essentially, they have shut down for whatever reason. It doesn't necessarily mean that, Secretary of State went in there and, shut their business down, but either by their own request, the company is no longer operating.
Okay, great. I just want to remind anyone, if they do have any questions, you can either put them in the Q&A or in the chat. Next question, where can a consumer find a listing of permit required repairs?
Sure. So Department of Buildings has, there's a specific part of their website, and it'll have projects that would require an easy permit, projects that require plans and permits, and then a list of projects that don't require permits at all. It's on DOB's website. I don't have an actual link to give, but I think if you Google Chicago Department of Buildings projects that require permit, that exact website that I'm talking about will come up.
Okay, great. Next question. For the past several months, I have had 10 to 15 calls per day by a group claiming to do donations for breast cancer or police protection. I try blocking them with the do not call list, but they still are calling. Will 311 service be able to stop these types of harassments by filing a claim?
Potentially, but we would have to be able to tie the business to the city of Chicago. I think we most typically refer these to the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, ftc.gov, because they handle the do not call registry on a national scale.
Okay, great. Next question. If the Department of Finance is in charge of collecting the settlement / judgment money, but they can't collect it for the consumer, how can a consumer expect to get the restitution money?
So a judgment that includes restitution, the city never gives up on that, and it's not dischargeable in bankruptcy. And then additionally, the city, when we file a consumer fraud complaint, so any complaint that's going to involve restitution, we cite not just a business that could potentially be dissolved or closed. We file the same case against the owner or the principal of the business and go after them as an individual. And because it's a city judgment that includes restitution, again, even if the individual filed for bankruptcy, that judgment isn't going away. It has to be paid. And so sometimes it can take a long time, months to years, where we're trying to force them to pay, but that judgment never goes away.
Next question, where can we find the consumer rights brochure?
This is a document that's created by the Illinois Attorney General. Again, I don't have any direct links offhand. You Google Illinois Attorney General Consumer Rights Brochure. It should come up as the first hit. It's a couple of page document that talks about kind of a lot of the same things that we talked about in this webinar of, making sure that you have a proper contract, things like that. But if you Google Illinois Attorney General Consumer Rights Brochure, it'll come up.
Next kind of question, more common. Thank you in advance for talking about condominium association fraud as it relates to board of managers, the association management firm, attorney, and any other agent of the association.
So BACP does accept complaints related to condo record requests. Condo associations are not licensees of the city of Chicago. So our abilities to file cases are a little bit more limited. It's more of a civil matter. But if you are a condo unit owner and you make a request to the board for certain documents and they refuse to provide them, then you could file a complaint with BACP, and BACP will attempt to have the association turn over those records to you.
Great, thank you. Next question. Is there a way to file complaints in Spanish?
Yes. So if you go to BACP's website, we do have complaint forms in Spanish, as well as, so for consumer fraud, as well as for laborers, and I believe the others as well. It's on the consumer section on BACP's website.
Great, thank you. If there are any more questions, can you please put them in the chat or the Q&A? And while we give them an extra minute to put their questions in, I just want to say again that this webinar has been recorded and will be posted on BACP's YouTube page, which is www.youtube.com/Chicago BACP. I also put that in the chat already. And then also, if you're interested in the certificate program or information or to get credit, please email bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. And this was also put in the chat. Getting lots of great information. Thank you so much. Valuable information.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of thank yous. I think that is all the questions that we have. I want to thank Marianne for taking your time out of your day and giving us all this great information. Thank you everyone for attending. See, this was very, very invaluable resources. Thank you and helpful. They summed it up for us.
Oh, thank you everyone. So sweet.
Yeah. Wishing everyone a great weekend and a safe weekend. And thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you everyone. Have a nice weekend.